Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, August the 30th. And welcome to our commentary. Just a few thoughts today on this Saturday, the first weekend of college football. This afternoon, Ohio State defeated Texas 14-7. The young quarterback, Cooper Manning, was with Texas. And this amazing family, of course, of quarterbacks. I think the young man has a lot of talent. But of course, Texas was playing the number one team, Ohio State, or the champions from last year, Ohio State. But, 14-7, it was a defensive game. There was a last minute touchdown there that made it 14-7. But, congratulate young Cooper Manning on getting his career started. You're getting old when you remember Archie Manning, who's the grandfather of this young man. So you've got Archie, and then, of course, Peyton and Eli, who were just fantastic quarterbacks just 20 years ago. They were absolutely great quarterbacks with the Colts and with the Giants, won a couple of Super Bowls, I think, between them. And now this young man, Cooper Manning, who, by all accounts, he's got the right name. He looks good. So I'm sure he's going to have a lot of success here in Texas. But it was a good game. It was a good game to watch. There was a lot of intensity in the crowd. I think there were a lot of Texas fans that went up there to Ohio State to watch this game. And it turned out to be, for those of us that got to see it on TV, turned out to be a pretty good game. Now, speaking of football, we learned the news today that Leroy Jordan, one of the great defensive players in Cowboys history. He was a part of those great teams, of the late 60s, early 70s. He passed away at age 84. He played for Alabama when he was in college and had a great career with the Dallas Cowboys. It still amazes me he's not in the Hall of Fame, but, I don't know. Sometimes stuff like that happens. But the guy was just an absolutely great player, Leroy Jordan. And on top of that, he was also a pretty good guy, a pretty good citizen. So Leroy Jordan, rest in peace, buddy. You were an absolutely great player. Let me begin by talking about a post that I have today over at the American Thinker where I talk about Katrina. And you may have forgotten that name, but Katrina was 20 years ago this weekend. Labor Day, or let's say last week of September, last week of August, first week of September, 2005. It's 20 years ago. That's kind of hard to believe. But Katrina was one of those moments when I think, things got out of control in the coverage of an event. Because I think at the end of the day, what you really had in New Orleans or in Louisiana that year, first of all, you had a terrible governor, an extremely incompetent mayor of New Orleans. And, the federal government can only do so much when you have so much incompetence on the ground. And I think eventually the federal government did come in and bail out the local government and bail out the city government, and things, turned out better. But when you have these levees break and you have such incompetence and you have so many people who chose not to get out of New Orleans, and of course the tragedy was inevitable. And I always thought that most of the criticism that President Bush got back then was completely unfair and politically motivated. And I thought it was just an absolutely horrible coverage on the part of the media of President Bush and the way that he handled that situation. But it was 20 years ago. But really, the post that I have over at the American Thinker today emphasizes the good things that happened. And one of the greatest things that happened with Katrina was the generosity and the way that the American people came through to help people in New Orleans. There were many families here in Texas, churches and organizations that took families to help them. Obviously, a lot of people were willing to go there and work in the rebuilding of New Orleans. So, it was a great moment to showcase the generosity and the good nature of the American people, the way they helped during this absolutely terrible crisis. So Katrina, 20 years old. I guess that again kind of makes you realize how time flies. 20 years ago this weekend, and I remember it quite well. I remember it quite well. We didn't get, of course, the hurricane up here in North Texas, but I think something that came out of Katrina. I was with Univision yesterday, and they were asking me about FEMA and what should be done about FEMA because there's talk of FEMA being replaced or whatever, and they were asking me about FEMA, and I said, what we've learned in this country is that if there's a tragedy like this somewhere, it depends a great deal on local leadership. And I pointed out, for example, in South Florida, whenever they've had any hurricanes, Governor DeSantis has proven to be an extremely effective leader, the man in charge. You can just see it all the way. He's the man in charge, and things are going to get done because he's going to make sure they get done. The same thing here in Texas with Governor Abbott when we've had these problems. Now, Governor Abbott doesn't have DeSantis' personality. He's a little bit more laid back, but the job gets done. The job gets done because there's leadership that gets it done. But then you go to California, LA, these fires they had recently. Look, they're still cleaning that up. They're completely lost. They've got licenses that can't not be issued. You have all kinds of regulations in California that make it impossible to get anything done. So a lot depends on the local leadership. And when you have strong, capable local leadership, it's amazing. It's amazing how quickly and how much more rapidly these problems can be fixed. So Katrina, plus 20. What can you say? One of the things that we learned about this terrible, absolutely horrible shooting up in Minnesota, Minneapolis, is that parents of some of these private schools, some of the organizations, had contacted Governor Walz and the legislature to see if they could get some help to protect their schools. And I guess they listened to them, but nothing got done. So on top of that, you're forcing some of these schools, of course, to get their own security. And that, of course, is pretty expensive. So I hope the lesson for the whole country, and this is why I'm hoping that President Trump we need some national legislation to protect the schools. I don't know whether they're private or whether they're whatever, and especially now with so many states going the direction of school choice. We got to have security at these schools because 99% of the battle is stopping the person before they start shooting. And when I saw that person up in Minneapolis had gotten to the window of the church, I knew that there was going to be a lot of dead kids because he's shooting at them. So the key here is to stop the person before he gets within a foot of the building or the church or whatever, or the school. And the only way you do that, of course, you got to lock the doors, of course. But the only way you do that is also by having guarded people out there, guards out there who are capable of stopping it, either by shooting the potential shooter or by at least disabling him so that he cannot do this kind of harm. So I hope that what comes out of this is a much stronger effort nationwide to secure these kids, especially with so many places going in the direction of school choice. I think that's very, very important that we do that. And speaking of this tragedy up there, every time you have these horrible things, there's always, you see the best of humanity, and you have these little kids on the ground being shot at, and you have some kids protecting other kids. There's a story of a kid who basically got on top of another one to protect him. Now he was hit by a bullet. Thankfully, he wasn't killed. But still, I mean, the idea that these kids would do that to protect their fellow students, it just speaks so well of them and their families, their parents. It's just remarkable, and it speaks well of humankind. That we still care about each other, and we're willing to do things like that for each other. So, hooray to those kids up there! I hope that President Trump will bring them to a State of the Union and recognize those kids who did these things, because they are heroes without any question. These are heroes. These are people who need to be recognized. Well, the governor of Texas has signed the maps, the so-called, he called it the beautiful, big, beautiful map, which I thought was pretty funny. So the big, beautiful map of Texas has been signed, but Texas is not going to be the only state changing maps. We understand that Missouri is going to do it. We understand that Florida is going to do it. And look, this is the way it should be done. The Democrats have been doing this for years. They've been gerrymandering their states for years to favor them. So we should do the same thing. The Republicans, they should do the same thing. And that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. You're going to see 5 new seats in Texas. You're going to see potentially 2 or 3 more in Florida. That's 8 new seats that will be added in Republican-based districts. And look, that's the way the Democrats have done it over the years. That's the way they've done it. Just take a look at the Illinois map. Take a look at the Massachusetts map. Take a look at the Maryland map. Take a look at the California map. 43 Democrats, 9 Republicans. That doesn't even come close to reflecting how people vote. 9 out of 52 is not 40%. And that's how the seats were distributed out there. I mean, in Massachusetts, there are 0 Republicans in the congressional delegation. So, look, I understand. If the Democrats want to do that, okay, do it. I'm not stopping them or criticizing them for doing it. Just don't criticize us when we basically do the same thing that they do. I mean, that's just the way it goes, guys. Everybody has to maximize their position. The Democrats have done it for years. I think it's time for the Republicans to do it for years and stop all the hypocrisy on the part of the Democrats about how terrible this is. Because as I said, they've been doing it for decades. They've been doing it for a very long time. Well, on this day in history, I leave you with one little birthday note. Ted Williams was born on this day in 1918. Yeah, I think he was born in San Diego, if my memory is correct. And then, of course, he made it to the major leagues. Something I learned today as I was reading about his life. Ted Williams was 23 years old in 1941 when he hit 406. 23 years old when he hit 406 in 1941. And you may remember the story of Ted Williams and how when he hit 406 that year, he went into the last day of the season hitting 399.6, which would have been rounded up to 400. The manager told him, Ted, you don't have to play. You've already hit 400. And he said, no. I'm going to get it the right way because everybody will always say that I hit 399.6, and that's not how I want it. So they had a doubleheader. The Red Sox had a doubleheader that day against, I think, the Philadelphia A's. They were called the A's back then, in Philadelphia, that is. And he went 6 for 8 in the doubleheader to finish the season at 406. He could have sat out and taken his 400, but he said no. Then they'll say that I hit 399.6. I want to go down as having hit 400 for real. And he ended up hitting 406. I mean, an absolutely amazing character to do something like that. So we remember Ted Williams, who I think most people will say was the greatest hitter of all time. You know, it's one of those arguments that goes on forever. There's a lot of great hitters in the history of baseball. But if you took a poll probably among, people, I think Ted Williams would come in number 1 or number 2, maybe Tony Gwynn in a more recent baseball history would come up close to that. But Ted Williams, without question, was, if not the best, certainly the top 2 or 3 greatest baseball hitters of all time. Great weekend, everybody. Happy Labor Day, and we'll see you the next time. We'll be chatting with our friend George Rodriguez on Sunday night. So we'll talk about these Texas maps once again. Bye-bye, everybody. This is Silvio Cantu in Dallas.